Welcome to Tipcast by the Nina Guardian. Hello and welcome to Tipcast. Myself, Shane Stapleton, Shane Brophy of the Nina Guardian, as ever, is here. And Mark O'Leary, All-Star 20 years ago now, Mark. Not to mention All-Ireland winner to go with it. How are you doing, man?
Very good, thanks, Shane.
Yeah, we'll start out. Look, let's go straight to it because Tipp are against Clare this weekend, Munster semi-final. And I can't help but think, as a young lad during the 90s, watching the Tipperary-Clare rivalry going, how much I hated Clare at the time. They absolutely sickened me. You know, there had been generations before me of just baiting Clare up and down different fields around Munster. Then all of a sudden, Gerlach Dan comes along and sickens us all. Mark, can you sum up that rivalry? Obviously, you took part in a lot of it, but we used to hate Luckdan. We enjoy him now. Hate Luckdan, hate Clare. What was the rivalry like on the inside?
Well, the first game I think I remember, Tipp versus Clare, was actually 1986, and it was a very big game for us locally here because there was a few Killer One lads on it. And I'm not sure if you remember back that far, the game went to a replay, and Clare actually won the replay. So that was my first memories of Tipp versus Clare. After that, then the next most memorable one is obviously 93, where Tipp were awesome in the Munster final, but didn't follow it up in the All-Ireland semi. But then, as you said yourself there, it kind of turned a corner then, I think, a couple of years after that. And once Clare won an All-Ireland or two, I suppose 97 was probably the real year where it all turned. No, I wasn't involved at that time, but we were up on the terrace there in Cork, and I'd say for atmosphere at a match, it was probably some of the greatest times ever. You know, there was 97, 99, around that era, 2000, there were some amazing games, and you'd be standing on the terrace and you'd hear, you know, the teams would come out at different times, obviously, and the fair terrace would go mental when Clare came out, and our terrace would go mental when Tipp came out. So, yeah, Clare had the upper hand, obviously, at that stage, and then I was lucky enough myself to get into the panel in 99, and I actually broke my thumb. I was hoping to have a chance maybe of playing in 99, and of course Davy Fitz came up the field and scored a penalty then to draw the first game, and Tipp were well beaten in the second one. And we finally, it was really building up there. As a player at the time, you know, it was all really about Clare. Nicky English had come in, and he came in with a very professional setup, but really the amount of physical work that was done, I think, was an attempt to match Clare and really try and match them physically and hopefully maybe beat them with the hurling then. So when we did manage to do that in 2000, it was amazing. Again, down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in Cork, with the old stadium there where the stands were really on top of you and the terrace was on top of you. It was an amazing atmosphere.
Yeah, and I remember I was at a lot of those games. The one I suppose remember is the 01 game, baking hot day, Páirc Uí Chaoimh, 40-something thousand people. I just felt like that was so key. Like, it was 15 points to 14. I just thought it was pure raw Munster hurling at its purest because I think both teams knew that this was key. Tipp knew they couldn't lose to them again. Clare probably knew it was probably the last thing of the old team, and like we didn't get a classic, but it's just the result was all that mattered that day.
Yeah, there was a certain type of hurling play that day, definitely. That, you know, looking back, I'd say it was fascinating rather than being a classic. We had beaten them in 2000, so we didn't win anything in 2000. So I suppose if we had to lose that game, which was a knockout game, it was a real step back for that group of players and for Nicky English in his management in his third year. It would have been a real step back. I believe then that was a semi-final, and then in the Munster final there was no knockout, so the pressure was off a little bit. You had the back door, but there was real pressure for that semi-final. It was hugely intense, the usual thing you get in Cork, massive crowd, everyone down for the weekend, baking hot day, tiny little dressing rooms, and then, you know, it kind of exploded then out in the field as well. And like everyone else, well, one of the best memories, I think, for Tipp that day was Owen Kelly getting absolutely pounded by 2 or 3 lads and getting up and striking the ball in. I think it was just a massive sign of defiance and kind of showed where he was going to go in his career.
Did you remember that incident live as it happened? Think, okay, there's something different about this. We're going to match these guys for steel. Like, it was like you had Clare as well, who was another novice on the other corner.
Yeah, there was a lot of hardy lads on that team now, in fairness, that wouldn't take a backward step. Like, if you start even in the full back line there, you'd earn it if you were trying to run through in training against those lads, So we knew we had lads who were, there was no mental fragility. Like, they were strong, they were ready for the challenge, and they were up for it. And I think it was probably the best case of management, in fairness, that Nicky English installed a lot of belief in that group, and we just felt, whatever happened, we were just going to keep going, and things would turn our way. And in fairness to the lads who finished it out, like, they're a massive battle. But I think it's a good sign of a team, and it was a good sign of things to come to win a really tight battle. I think it was only a point in it at the end.
And Shane, do you remember anything else from these rivalries? Another one that sticks out to me is Micheál Webster patting Davy Fitz on the head one of the days. And I think wasn't he dragging Brian Lohan around the back of the goals and everything?
I think that might have been Cork. I think it was Dermot O'Sullivan. He might have took it for a wander, I think, in the 05 Munster final. All right, I know the result didn't go away, but like I still, as a supporter, I think those trips to Cork were special around the late 90s and the early 90s. Like, even to play Limerick, to play Waterford. I know we lost the 02 Munster final, but there was just, like, there are probably memories I'll take to the grave with me, just as a supporter being. I remember some of the times, I think the matches were throwing around 4 o'clock. We could have been, some of the lads from Laura, we could have been on the terrace at 1 o'clock because you wanted to get the perfect vantage point, maybe just to the right of behind the goals, not too far from not too close to the front, just enough at the back to get a perfect vantage point. Just brilliant days, and I suppose we got our fair share of disappointment with some brilliant victories as well.
Mark, what was it like walking around in the parade when in a packed Páirc Uí Chaoimh or wherever else for some of those massive games when the sun is baking down? Like, now maybe the weather will turn over the weekend, but just lovely day where I am today. But what was it like walking around those parades and the anticipation?
Sure, it was as exciting and intense, I suppose, as it looks, when you're in the stand as well. Like, I actually really enjoy them now, the parade, when it's going around and the different sections of the crowd start going crazy when the team is there. But when you're getting ready for the match, you just want it to start, and it's just another thing that has to be done to delay the throw-in. I don't know, maybe some lads enjoy it. I think most people just want to get on and get the game started and get the first few pucks in to get yourself into the game. But I think it's something very unique about hurling. I don't know, is it done in any other sport, but I think it's a really great feature of GAA, and that you're really saying, here's our best lads and there's your best lads, and you're parading them around the field, and it's kind of the signal that the battle is about to start.
Would you have looked at those big figures, those totemic figures like Daly, Davy Fitz, even Gerlach Nan on the sideline? Was there players in the panel or yourself who would have properly hated them? I mean, obviously you're a bit more reasonable as an individual once you leave the dressing room and the pitch area, but would you be getting that personal about it?
I would say maybe not quite so personal. Like, you might hate the concept of the team, or you might hate something that the team has done, or the manager maybe was probably the mouthpiece for the team. I remember in 2000, I think, was the first time I would have played them in championship, and I had the pleasure of marking Anthony Daly, of course, which I wasn't sure what to expect. I was ready for the worst. I was ready for as many slaps as he was going to try and give out, and try and give a few back myself. But it turned out on the day, I don't know whether it was his style or maybe he was just a very clean hurler, but he was trying to play the ball all day long, but there was hardy lads there. There was Shawnee McMahon, who centre back, who was tough as nails and very nice fella off the field, but he didn't hold back on it. Of course, you had Lynch there midfield, who was, again, you had the two Lohans, so you had serious players and serious names. But at the same time, then you look at Tommy Dunn and Declan Ryan beside you, and John Lahey is there, and these are lads that, I suppose, 7 or 8 years previous, these were legends in my eyes. So we had them on our side as well, definitely.
Absolutely. Shane, was there one game in particular that was the one that got away as far as you were concerned? I have to say 97, both the Munster final and the All-Ireland final, that was tough to take.
I think the 99 drawn match was the killer for me. Like there was such a build up to that, and like Tipp out hurled Clare in that game. Like I thought when Eddie Tucker stuck the ball over the bar about 10 minutes to go, I said we have them here, and then you had Shelley going through, and Davy Fitz made a brilliant save, and then I suppose it's the drama how it finished. Clare will say Conor Clancy was fouled. We'd always say Conor Clancy was. We always think the 09 final where Richie Farr barged the Conor Clancy one was more clear cut, and that came against us too. But definitely the 99 one I thought was worse, and I suppose the way we maybe, I don't know whether it was a psychological thing or what, but the way we didn't show up for the replay, and I suppose maybe it showed a sign of how great Clare were that they came out 6 days later, and what Gerald Kane has always said was their finest, probably 70-minute performance where they just blew the doors off Tipperary. Like that was even though Clare didn't go on to win the All Ireland, they sort of let Tipperary know that on their best day they still had us even at that stage.
I think with a kind of a team like Clare and the status they had at the time to catch them is the first day, and Tipp were coming with a new team with a lot of players that Clare mightn't have known. So I think you often see that if you don't beat them the first day, they'll probably learn a lot more and are maybe more ready in the second day.
And what did you make of the clash last weekend of Waterford and Clare? Clare got out of the blocks very, very quickly, and I think most people would accept that they were full value for their 122 to 21 point win. Waterford, they were missing, I think, 8 of their All-Ireland team there and made a real burst towards the end. But Clare had 22 wides, maybe could have won by more. So, Mark, were you impressed with them?
I was impressed. I was impressed with their defence more so than anything. I think they were very well coached in the defence. I think they might have gone back a little bit to the old style kind of tight marking that we... I don't know, I'm not... there's others who would be better to say than me, but I'm not sure if we're gone too loose in our marking, if we're gone zonal marking with the way the tactics have gone. But Clare seemed to just say, right, here's my man, I'm going to stick with him. And it really worked out. John Conlon was immense for them. And I just think with Waterford, like, they're missing a lot of players. And it's very hard when you're missing so many players. But they would have had a particular game plan that was based around probably having those players. And I think they stuck with that game plan, and maybe it just wasn't suitable for the players they had. And there was a lot of talk on the telly about the way Waterford, they just take you on from wherever. They might be midfield or wing forward, and they'll take you on and try and generate a goal. And they seem to just get caught up in that. I'm not sure what the team talk was before, what the tactics were, but looking at it, it looks like they were instructed, to try and get a couple of early goals to blow Clare out of the water. And I think they forgot to just do the basics and take the easier points when they were on. So I think, it's very disappointing for Waterford. Impressive from Clare. And if they can get their accuracy right, they'll be hard to beat someday.
Yeah, Shane, I mean, I'm sure Liam Cahill will be very disappointed with that performance. And though they may have a few injuries in their team, Shane O'Donnell wasn't playing, Patrick O'Connor wasn't playing, Aaron Fitzgerald, the cornerback, wasn't available either. So Clare certainly made the best of what they had. And obviously that matchup, Tony Kelly, very, very difficult to stop. And not only that, Caleb Lyons, for about 50-55 minutes, his attacking threat was taken out of it because he was playing corner/fullback on Kelly.
Yeah, I thought it was a strange move. I just thought there was too much made of Caleb Lyons marking Tony Kelly last year, but like Tony Kelly was, I'm sure he was injured for most of that game. Like that told us nothing about whether actually Caleb Lyons could do a job on Tony Kelly. But even if he did, I just think like Lyons is such. So what would you say? I just think Lyons is such a key player in that Waterford team. Like you were taking one of your key players out of his best position, which is wing back, and like as soon as he went centre stroke wing back in the last 15 minutes, Waterford started a motor because they had somebody who was willing to take the ball and break the lines, and like that's what Waterford want to do: break the first tackle, lay it off to somebody who is generally free and they could maybe take a long range shot. And they just had none of that for the 55 minutes. There's no doubt that overall they were flat, but look, I thought Waterford gave in to Clare a small bit. I thought Lohan suckered. He sort of baited maybe Liam Cahill into sacrificing maybe Callum Lyons to deal with Tony Kelly, and he bought it, and I think it ended up costing Waterford. I wouldn't say it was going to decide the game. Ultimately, it definitely affected Waterford negatively.
Yeah, and Mark, would you go a lot like Liam Cahill's had a brilliant run so far with Waterford, and of course his pedigree from underage with Tipperary can't be questioned at all. He's done magnificently well. But do you think that he got it wrong against Clare last weekend?
Well, it's very difficult when you're a manager and you're missing so many players, and I suppose he was basing it on I presume it's been a tactic of theirs, since he's come into, the style that they play, that running style. So it's very difficult to change that immediately. He was basing a lot on the evidence he had seen in their game against Tipp. So I wouldn't say he necessarily got it wrong. I think most of us, if we were in his situation, would have been happy with where Waterford were and would have probably tried to stick with what had worked previously. I just think that sometimes maybe the obsession with goals might have caused Waterford to take a wrong option at times. And when there was easy points on, they were trying to run the ball. And when it didn't work out, then they seemed to be a little bit confused about, what do we do now? But one thing, that we all know about Waterford is that they're very big into their hurling. They get very excited. I think they may have talked themselves a little bit too high, and they may have talked themselves a little bit ahead of themselves. Especially after that win against Tipp, that they were world beaters, that they were going to win the All-Ireland, and they maybe, I'm talking more so the fans now, but that rubs off on the players. And conversely, having lost like that may have been the best thing to happen Tipp. It's a real eye-opener for them, and it'll certainly make them, I suppose, prepare as well as they can for the match against Clare now.
Yeah, and I wonder just even about moving Ozzie Gleeson back into the back line. Now, I thought he was the Waterford's man of the match and one of the most impressive players on the field. But he's a guy who can win you a game in the forward line. How he played as the season went on in 2020 said to me, here's a game winner. It's very hard to find those. And then he's moved back into the back line. And maybe that's somewhat to kind of cater for, or cover off some of the injuries that they have there, Tyke de Burka and so on. But their forwards, they had no shot on target on play in the first half. They had just a total of 7 shots. 2 of them went over the bar. Both of them were from Ozzie Gleeson, wing back. And they're trying to get him to, there aren't many players that can do that. Be a man of the match at one end of the field and then man of the match at the other end of the field and keep getting moved around. So between their injuries and moving him around and maybe even the hype thing that might be going on in the county, they were kind of caught every which way. But do you think that for Tipperary, Shane, Liam Sheedy, you were speaking to him last week, and he talked about how for 300 of the 350 minutes of the league, he feels that the team played well up until obviously that second half, especially against Waterford. Do you think that Tipperary are in a good place going into this game? They've had a chance to watch Clare, and Clare having to play 75 minutes of hard hurling. Will they feel it in the legs as the game goes on?
I think I don't think it'll maybe cost. I think it'll help Wexford. It'll help Clare at the start. I think they'll be marked sharp. I think first 5 or 10 minutes they might have the advantage in Tipp, and they'll have that bit of sharpness. I don't think it'll take Tipp too long to get into the game. Maybe in the last 10 or 15 minutes, it might show on Clare that maybe the exertions of maybe playing in 20-21 degree heat last weekend might take its toll. But look, I definitely think Tipp are forewarned, even if Clare maybe had only struggled over the line. Look, we know what we're going to get from Clare. I think it was a typical sort of a Brian Lohan trained Clare team. Everything they sort of, they're like how would you beat? They were like bees to honey. Everything that moved last weekend, they seemed to be first to the breaking ball. They were just on it. But I think from a Tipperary point of view, I think Clare's style probably, I don't think it'll cause as much upset as maybe what Waterford would like to do. I was surprised how little actually Clare worked the ball through the lines. They were looking to try and hit Tony Kelly and Aaron Shanahan as early as they could. While they mixed it up maybe to a greater extent than Waterford did, I was surprised at how much they got from that. And I think it'll be interesting to see what Clare decide to do next. Like, I'm not convinced we'll see Tony Kelly at full forward now the next day. Like, I just think maybe that was a horses for courses selection. That maybe, like, while you could think if Kelly went in on Paddy Maher, he could do a lot of damage. But that's not to say they might think we'll go a different way. Maybe we'll play Kelly out in the half forward line or even midfield in this one. So I'd be just interested. It'd just be interesting to see whether Lohan goes with the same again or whether he tries to mix it up. If he does mix it up in terms of what he does with Kelly, I just think Tipp are more flexible. I don't think Tipperary are going to just maybe rip up how they're going to line out in defence just to deal for one player. Like, if he does play in the full forward line, I'd be surprised if maybe Cathal Barrett doesn't pick him up. I think maybe Pádraig Maher might go on Aaron Shanahan. But if Kelly goes out in the half forward line, like Brendan Maher is made for him after what he did in the game in Ennis 2 years ago. Like, Brendan, if you ask Brendan Maher to do a man marking role, he'll do it perfectly. Like, so I that's the interesting one for me, is what would Clare do with Tony Kelly on Sunday?
And Mark, what would you fear about this Clare team? I mean, to my money, yes, there's some really, really good players. There are players to be exploited also. Now, Aidan McCarthy, he looks like a very good player. He played wing forward the last day. He was getting roared and shouted at one or two stages over, if you hit another wide, you'd be coming out here beside us. But he looks very talented. I thought Ryan Taylor was a very good wing forward. Obviously, Shane has talked about Tony Kelly. But maybe the likes of John Conlon, who you wondered at time where Waterford trying to pass him the ball, he got onto so much of it. But he's at centre back. At some point, is he going to get exploited? Like, he's a really, really good hurler, but he's not a native centre back. And if a team is able to run down the throat of him in a way that Waterford didn't, maybe he's there to be exploited.
Yeah, well, I was expecting him possibly to be exploited last Sunday, and I was very impressed with him. I was very impressed with his skill, massively impressed with his strength and his ability just to glide through challenges. His positioning, his reading of the game, I thought was very good. So, look, there's the coaches out there who are coming up against Clare. They'll be looking at every player and seeing what their weak points are and how they can exploit them. I'm not sure now, unless you can draw him further away from the goals and get someone to take him on, get him turning back towards his own goals. Maybe that's the way to exploit him. But I don't think we didn't see any weaknesses in him last week. I was very, very impressed with him. In terms of strengths, I think obviously Tony Kelly is the main one. But how many wides did Clare have? Well over 20 wides.
22, yeah.
22, so if they can sharpen up their shooting, I think that's going to be something that we're really going to have to look at. Their wing forwards, they look very sharp. Final product wasn't great. There was a lot of wides, but I think we're going to have to avoid giving them the chances and giving them the space that they found against Waterford, definitely.
Is there any of the weaknesses from Tipperary in the league that bother you coming into this, Shane? You spoke to Liam Sheedy, and he was talking about how people get very caught up in talking about the age profile of Tipperary.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, I'd be in Liam's camp on that one. Like, I think, like, okay, there's a lot of miles in the clock and probably of some of our older brigade, but like, you telling me with 10 or 15 minutes to go that experience won't be invaluable. And I know maybe it's not comparing apples and apples, but you see Paddy Fitzpatrick from Clare, like, making his championship debut at 31 years of age last weekend, and you just look at him, you think, geez, like, he's not your archetypal modern intercounty hurler, but God, he was so effective the last weekend. And like, I think he's going to be a bit of a problem for Tipp, like, because he's one of those, I don't know if Mark would agree with me, just one of those annoying wing backs. He probably won't do anything spectacular, but he'll just do enough to do his job. And like, who will Tipp have on him? Like, I was trying to figure out what way the Tipp attack will be lined out. Like, I think the management are big fans of Willie Connors. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts this weekend, and that maybe. But then on the other hand, if you're looking at a Paddy Fitzpatrick, maybe is a Michael Breen sort of a wing forward, a player that could give him off. But Fitzpatrick doesn't look very quick. So like, if you got maybe a Breen sort of a player, or maybe getting on the ball in midfield and maybe taking him on up the wing, or like a Breen could run in from the wing in towards John Conlon as well. So like, it'd be interesting to see how the Tipperary management break down what they saw from Clare the last day. Like, coming back to John Conlon, like, there's no doubt he was outstanding against Waterford. But like, I thought he was made look very, very good with the amount of aimless ball the Waterford half back sent down his direction. And like I can't think that the Tipp manager won't say, lads, if Conlon is going to sit back, maybe trying to cut off the supply into Ford and Callan, that Noel McGrath is going to be floating around there somewhere in acres of space. And like if Noel McGrath finds the ball 10, 20 times on Sunday, like he's going to either score himself or he's going to bring others into the game, and Tipp will get an awful lot of shots at goal.
Mm. Mark, just like looking at some of the players that coming into this game, Shane has obviously talked about some of the matchups there, but like is form on the side of a lot of these players, or do we even look at that Waterford performance and just assume that they were going through a heavy training block, so some of these players weren't going to stand out? But like, you know, Callan, he's only just back. He got 1-1 the last day and got a point against Westmeath, but probably not absolutely hopping off the side. Michael Breen, quiet enough the last day. Jason Ford's had some good moments as well. Like, there's plenty of these players that they've mixed the good with the bad. So, I mean, where are we at form-wise, or can we really tell?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to tell at the moment. With a young team, I think it's very important to have continuity in form in the league so that you're building up the confidence and you're preparing them for championship. I don't think it's as essential for, you know, this Tipp team. A lot of them have 3 All-Ireland medals. They've been through it all before. So I don't think it's as essential, you know, that they're in you know, tip-top form in the league. But I would like to have seen Seamie Callan with a bit more game time under his belt. I know he's been injured. And I think he's a massively important leader there in the forwards for Tipperary. It's going to be hard to know exactly where we are until the ball is thrown in. But look, they've been through it all before. I'd imagine that you know, that these players know how to get themselves right for these games, and if anyone knows how to get them right as well, Liam Sheedy does. And just one thing, like I was talking to one of the players who was playing against Waterford, and they did, now I wasn't making excuses, but they did mention that, you know, it wasn't like they were being rested for that game. Training still went on. You know, the focus was always first round of the championship. And that player was saying as well, you know, that they think that it will have done them no harm in order to focus their mind before the first round. So we don't know exactly where they are, but I think with the experience we have, it's not a major downer that we haven't been amazing in the last game of the league.
Shane, as far as I'm concerned, one of the big things that's been a recurring trend in the last certainly year, I even think back to the Cork game in the qualifier last year, when you had, I think it was close to 10 shots from about 100 yards during the games. It was something that happened throughout the league this year. There's lots of very good hurlers on the team, and maybe most of them are backing themselves to strike over points from wherever. But I would rather 10 balls fired into Seamie Callan and Jake Morris, Jason Ford, bounced lovely in front of them, diagonals or whatever, than having 10 shots from 100 yards when half of them or three-quarters of them are going wide. So I think if that was kind of ironed out, that could... I mean, I think the first couple of games I was looking at Tipperary during this league, and I think there was only like maybe 5 decent balls went into the forward line, into the inside line now I'm talking about. But Tipperary used that ball a bit better. Surely the stick men that Tipp have can deliver ball better than anyone else. And then get it into Callan's hand, it's just dangerous.
Oh, that definitely. Like you would just hope maybe that something has been held back for the summer. Like I think it's, while it's important that we all want Tipperary to win ultimately this week, I just think that Tipp have to win, showing something more. Like I just think if they're going to win an All Ireland, I think other counties don't fear us anymore. They respect us. They respect the skill level and the quality of our players. They look at us and think they're gettable. Like, so I just think I'd love to see his Tipp going out and playing the bit between their teeth and really ripping into this game and showing really how good they are. As you mentioned, the quality of ball, and I'd say they were probably one of the weakest long-range shooting teams there are. I know maybe that's saying that you have Ronan Maher's well able to score from long range, but then like you don't know how Paddy Cadell, Alan Flynn, they can all score, but they're probably only really finding their feet at this level. Brendan Maher, we know, can score. You're probably thinking Seamus Kennedy on the other wing is good for the odd point or two, but I definitely think compared to the likes of Limerick or Galway, who have good long range shooters, maybe it's not our strength, and that if we could find some way of maybe drawing out opposition half backs where we could send in that bit of diagonal ball into Callan and Ford and Bubbles or whoever starts John McGrath. But like my Achilles heel, I thought with Tipp is that as good as stickmen as our forwards have been, we're all the same. Like there's none of them blindingly quick. And I was disappointed maybe that the likes of Mark Keogh or Jake Morris or Andrew Ormond, who I think I'm a big fan of, like, and that we didn't see more of them during the league. Like with that Jake's in to his third year, like he's done good things, but hasn't been consistent. Same with Mark. And I think Andrew Ormond offers something completely different that Tipp don't have at senior level. He's probably not going to be thrown in at the deep end. Like maybe it's something like that we need, maybe just to shake it up. I'd love to see maybe something fresh in our starting 15. I'm not convinced we're going to get it. Whether I know the likes of Brian McGrath are very close to getting in, Barry Hogan in the goals, I say Andrew Ormond, but I'm not convinced maybe when the team is announced on Friday night we're going to get it.
Yes, and Mark, both of those points actually, just the use of the ball. I mean, it's easy to say it on the sideline or on a show here, but the use of the ball, and are there any young players that you'd like to see thrown in?
Well, Andrew Ormond is obviously has shown huge potential in under 20 and under 21. He's, I think it's just possibly the way the league was structured between this year and last year. There just wasn't as much chance to blood players. But just going back to the ball, the type of ball that struck in. It wasn't today or yesterday. I was playing under 14 back in the 90s, and I distinctly remember our coaches saying, hit the ball in low into the full forward line. And with all the changes in hurling that have gone on, I still think it holds true. If you can get good ball inside into your forwards, it's vital, and we definitely haven't been doing it enough in the league. I think we have to play the percentages a bit more. The long range points look great, but when they don't come off, it's just heads down again from the lads inside where they hit blasting the ball over our heads. So I think we can improve hugely on that. Just on another point in playing the percentages, it was just noticeable in the Waterford match last week when the game was kind of getting a little bit closer. Waterford got 2 line balls within scoreable range, and I don't want to put down any player, but Austin Gleeson ran over to take him, and I said to myself, I know exactly what's happening here. So the game was slowed down, the long line ball was taken, and twice went wide without a player coming into it, So I think you really have to play the percentages. I think it's something maybe we haven't done enough in the league. I'm hoping we can improve it, but both for things like line balls, make better use of them, and for things like, playing the ball in to our forwards rather than taking a pot shot under pressure. There's a time for the 90-yard or the 80-yard point, but it's not every time you get the ball.
Yeah,
Shane, I was just doing something to bring you back to. I suppose another impressive aspect of Clare last weekend was their full back line, and I suppose the old school defending of Cleary, Flanagan, and Rory Hayes. They were touch tight, and as good as that was, and I suppose as Mark mentioned it earlier, maybe there's a lot of criticism and maybe the high scoring nature of matches, and maybe that was put down to some of the lazy defending and maybe zonal defending, as Mark mentioned earlier. But I just wonder, could that touch tight defending actually play into Tipp's hands? Like if our full forward line get that ball into their hand first, they're in business. And if you're too tight on your inside forward and he gets the ball first, he can turn you and he's gone. And I just think, if we, as Mark mentioned, we get the low ball in quick, if we get it into our hands first, I just think as excellent as that careful backline were last weekend, I just think our forwards, if they could turn on a sixpence, they'll go in on goal and go for the goal chance.
Yeah, well, I think Tipp have an unbelievable array of inside forwards. And I mean, this is something we've talked about before, that maybe there's too many of them. You could name 5 different corner forwards that will start in the 6 forward positions at a time, and finding the right balance is always the challenge, because how do you leave out some of those players? You just have to try and find a way to accommodate them. You're never going to drop Seamus Callanan, obviously, and rightly so. I mean, he's 36 championship goals, arguably one of the greatest players of all time, and he's still absolutely brilliant. If the wrong ball goes in, if it's a lot of this ball with snow on it that we see way too often, like the whole Barcelona players but playing like Stoke City, if that happens, Tipperary can lose this game. If the right ball goes in, the sort of ball that we saw in 2016 when even down to 14 men we were beating Limerick, or against Cork making William Egan, making an Egypt out of William Egan, who was playing sweeper that day because such lovely ball was going in. If Tipperary play the right ball in and it's Jake Morris and Seamus Callanan in there, or if it's Jason Ford in there, or whoever it might be in there, Rory Hayes, Conor Cleary and Paul Flanagan could end up conceding massive scoreline in there. They were good, but Waterford made them look brilliant. Like they certainly are good defenders, but like Desi Hutchinson scored 2-2 last year in the qualifier against Rory Hayes, but Rory Hayes won a few balls against the head as well, so you have to give him credit there. But like the forwards that Tipperary have, the inside forwards, are a higher quality than Waterford had. Waterford, 5 of their 6 forwards didn't even score. Very few of them even had a shot. And I think tactically they were completely outdone. Like, this is a big aspect of the game for me now. Are Clare going to repeat the thing of, from the puck out, as they did against Waterford, their full forward line dropped back, their half-back, or obviously Colin drops back, everyone more or less, they just completely flood the middle. Waterford came out, they didn't know what to do, they had no one running off the shoulder, and ended up just playing static ball or hitting it long, where John Conlon, Diarmuid Ryan and Paddy Fitzpatrick were standing back. Now, have Tipperary looked at that and have they decided what to do if Clare do the same thing again? Because Tipperary will be in bother if they haven't planned for that. And you and I have talked about this before, and Mark, maybe you'd feel the same, but Tipperary don't really run off the shoulder of each other all that much, even though some of the players might be there to do it. But how often do you see a tip man running, looking for contact, giving it to someone off the shoulder, they punch through the line as well, and all of a sudden Tip is putting the opposition on the back foot?
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, and if Clare repeat that and gets very crowded around the midfield and defence, it's something that Tip are definitely going to have to come up with. And again, look, back to basics. You know, if you can win your ball, if your first touch is good, I think Tip have shown in the past that they are very good in finding free men who can get into space and have a shot at the goals. So, you know, we need the ball to be sticking to hand. We need players who can win the ball and then find their teammates and work their way through that. I think you're right that we don't have the man coming at pace to give a hand pass to, but I think the Tip style is maybe to find a man who is floated into space and maybe give him a 20-yard stick pass, and that man can score. Look, I remember Liam Griffin back in the 96 All-Ireland when they beat Limerick. He had gone through every single aspect of what might happen in the game. I think as a management team, you have to do that as well. You have to be prepared for anything. So I'm assuming that Tip will have all avenues covered and will have considered this as well for Sunday.
I think this is one of those games, or maybe a lot like 2015 and 2019, where I just get the sense there's a big performance coming from Tip. I remember we went into the Gaelic Grounds, I think in 2015 against Limerick, and we thought we were vulnerable, and I think we won 4-23 to 116 or something. We blew, I think Michael Breen might have got a couple of goals, and we devoured Limerick. And then we went down to Páirc Uí Chaoimh 2 years ago, and we were probably a little bit, the doubts were probably there, and arguably that was probably our best performance of that championship. Even when we won the All-Ireland, when we went down to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and just the simplicity of our hurling, the slickness, everything just seemed to come off. And you just hope that Sheedy and Owen Kelly and the management, Eamon O'Shea, this has been the day. It's the 4th of July has been the one they've been targeting all along, to have the guys fit and prime. And look, last year was, we all know, while it was the same for all counties last year, we had our issues. We had the McGraths were flat after the county championship. Seamus Kennedy, Barry Heffernan, Pádraig Maher all carried injuries in from the club championship. They missed a fair chunk of training going into the Munster championship. There's no excuses this year. Look, the Bonner's been gone for 4 or 5 weeks. That's been dealt with. Even Niall O'Mara had been ruled out for a couple of weeks, so it's not a surprise. And look, I think Niall will be a loss for this game. Hopefully he'll be back for a Munster final or a qualifier. But look, I think compared to heading into the first round of the championship last November, I just think we're in a better place, and you just hope that the last 3 weeks, and maybe that the little bit of a warning, as Mark said, we got from Waterford that scared everybody into championship mode.
Yeah, even if Tipperary aren't perfect, if they come out with fire and energy in this game, I expect Tipperary to come through here. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, Shane, and I think you're probably happy now that your positioning of Tipperary as the the third team in Ireland has been proven.
I was wrong.
Well, look, sure, it remains to be seen, doesn't it? But I think I'd agree with Shane, definitely, yeah. I think we have the players. I think Clare, while it will be a tough challenge, I'd agree that I think their style will suit us in that it's a more standard kind of straightforward style rather than the the Waterford or the way Limerick play. And I think we have the players to win it. Yeah, I do. I think we just have the ability, the experience. We've gone through it all before, and I'm hoping that they've learned from the Waterford game and we're primed and ready to go Sunday.
Would you agree, Shane?
Yeah, I think I just sense, I suppose, I'd give Liam Sheeny the benefit of the doubt. Like he tends to get this team ready for when they need to, and I'm just intrigued to see what starting 15. I think we can get too bogged down in starting 15s because you need those 5 subs coming off the bench to finish the game. So like you need to have a bit of oomph there. So like let me see. I just the makeup of the forward line is the one that interests me. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we go down the Gareth Southgate route of maybe having a bit of a cautious team of maybe having Flynn, Cadell, and McCormick in the middle of the field, with maybe only having maybe a Niall, or obviously Noel McGrath, maybe Callan and Ford and Bubbles as being your 4 shooters. You could have Michael Breen in there and Willie Connors as workers as well. Because I just don't know. I still think John McGrath didn't show me enough in the league to say he was back to his best, and I just wonder would he be better coming on. The same with Jake Morris too. If you know Jake maybe against a tiring defence would be a very, very dangerous animal as well. So I think we'll know on Friday with the starting 15 what we think Tipperary are going to try and do.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll move on to the other matches coming this weekend. And if anyone wants to get their comments in on Twitter, Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and we'll try and get to them. But the other Munster semi-final is on this weekend, 7 o'clock at Semple Stadium on Saturday night. Cork against Limerick. Limerick have looked unbelievable, for the last couple of seasons, bar that All-Ireland semi-final against Kilkenny, really. Then the league, they had a slow enough start, but things have changed in the past couple of weeks. And the way Limerick saw off Cork a couple of weeks ago, now they weren't much changed teams, Mark, but like, how much do you read into that league game? Because like in the past couple of years, Cork have shown the championship that they're able to match Limerick.
Well, I suppose the first thing to remember is that Cork beat them in 2019 when they definitely weren't expected to. So Cork have it in the locker now. I think it's very hard to know what Cork are going to bring. I don't have a massive faith in Cork, and I just don't think they're proven at all in the championship. I think Limerick will win this game. I think it'll be standard fare. I can't see a massive upset coming. I think Limerick will just play the way they always played. They'll get the ball to their scorers, and they'll get the scores. How much do we read into the league game? Limerick steamrolled them really, but I mean, I don't think you can read as much into it. But I still think Limerick will just have way too much for Cork.
Shane?
Yeah, I think Limerick will win. My issue with Cork, like I know I've even listened to some of the Cork people, they're even Mark Landers and a few more, that we know on their day, and if Cork bring it on their day, they can beat Limerick. They're probably the one team that have been able to maybe cause Limerick problems, maybe along with Galway in the last couple of years. But it's hard to get away. I know you don't want to take too much from the league game, but it's hard to get away from the fact that it's like, I don't think Clare or Cork, I think Cork are still going to go with the short puck out. And they're still going to end up walking into trouble, because like we saw what Limerick did, like, and that was Limerick without Tom Morrissey and Gerard Hegarty, if I'm not mistaken, in the half-forward line that day. So they're going to start, and like, I just think, what happens if that breaks down again? What's the plan B? Because like they just can't keep going with the short puck out, and we know if they get the short puck out right and they can get it past that sort of wall of the Limerick midfield and half forward line, then they're in business, and they got a couple of good goals that day and a couple of good scores. But I just cannot think that they're going to go with the same shot puck out routine again, and it's not going to end up. I'd like to think they'll improve from it, but it's going to end up conceding scores like it did the last of us.
I can't see them not doing it.
Limerick are going to turn enough of that ball over into scores again to win the game.
But I don't think they can deviate from it now, because
no,
they themselves know that the long ball isn't going to work for them. It'll work some days, but it's not really going to work against Limerick with the team of giants they have and the guys that get onto the breaks around the middle, Will O'Donoghue and so on. But I think that they threw in a lot of young lads against Limerick that day, and they said, come hell or high water, we're going to go with that short ball. And these young lads, they might get destroyed today, but they'll learn from it. And then they bring on Patrick Horgan and Luke Meade at half-time. And maybe Limerick took their foot off the gas, but I think they improved noticeably in the second half. I actually think Cork will do it, and they'll do it with relative success in this game. Now, ultimately, I, like both you, think that Limerick are going to win this game. And it could bomb. But, Mark, I kind of think that Cork will make strides. And even if it doesn't mean they win this game, it might stand to them as the year goes on.
Yeah, look, I'm basing everything, I suppose, on what they've done previously, and maybe I'm discounting the win they had in 2019 too much. I'd be interested to see what effect Donal O'Grady has in terms of organisation, particularly in defence. But I think they need massive improvement. I don't think they've shown us anything that will tell us that they can beat Limerick this year. It's looking at their game, I don't think the style is very nice to watch even. I don't think it's inspiring for the players or for anyone looking on. I don't want to put them down too much now, but I think it's like when Kilkenny were at their best. People would say, well, I wonder will such and such beat Kilkenny? And the answer really is Kilkenny at that time and Limerick at this stage have to be favourites until proven otherwise. I think they have to be. I think they have too much for Cork at the moment.
Yeah. You are trying to almost do a bit of mental gymnastics to come up with ways for Limerick to lose this game, aren't you? Does it make the prospect of watching Limerick games a little bit boring, Shane?
Not particularly, because
they're a bit robotic in how they play, as in it's a pattern and they're brilliant at it.
I'm not a fan of Limerick style. It's very prescriptive. And look, in fairness to them, John Kiley and Paul Kinnerk, they've got every player bought into what they need to do. And look, it mightn't be easy on the eye, but by God, it's effective. It's winning games. They're minding the ball. They sort of work three passes ahead. If a player gives a pass, maybe the two players actually know where in 2 passes time I need to know where I have to be. Or sometimes the last couple of years they had nearly a one-man full forward line with Aaron Gillan, and look, Aaron Gillan is brilliant at what he did, and why not do it? And I actually think it's a high risk strategy. Whereas if your first touch is off at all, even a couple of their players, it can break down pretty quickly. But in fairness, particularly for the likes of Aaron Gillan, he's brilliant at what he does. His first touch is so good, and it rarely breaks down for him. He gets the ball in his hand. He brings Flanagan into the play. He brings Cian Lynch. He brings Garrod Hegarty. I just think they're so efficient in what they do. I suppose that's maybe that's the word I would describe Limerick is that their efficiency is probably what sets them apart from everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any final thoughts?
And you mentioned that there's. Sorry, no, I was saying Shane mentioned as well there. I mean, it's the team. Everyone buys into it. At the end of the day, if you can have 15 players buying into the same idea and all playing on the same wavelength, it becomes massively powerful. I think Limerick would really epitomise that over the last few years. But I'd like to see Tipp meet them maybe. Whether if in the Munster final, I'd definitely like to see. If not in the Munster final, I'd definitely like to see Tipp meet them later on in a knockout game. I think it would be a real challenge for Tipp, and I'd love to see Kilkenny were unbeatable 2009, 2010, and Tipp were the one team who were able to stand up to them at that stage. Now I know we're older now, but we have extra experience as well. But I'd really love to see what can Tipp bring in a knockout game when at the later end of the championship when it really matters against Limerick.
Yeah, but it looks like we're all back into Limerick to win this game. The Leinster as well, that's on. Both games are on in Croke Park on Saturday, 2:00 and 4:30. Galway, Dublin, Kilkenny, Wexford. There'll be 8,000 fans in at that. Now, Dublin had a very significant win over Antrim last week. I was under the cosh with you, Shane Brophy, and also with Brian Flannery about Dublin and where they were going. And by God, they drove the boot in, and they drove the boot in hard on Antrim, putting up 331 to 22 points. Credit where it's due, they were absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I know, they were, and I did say maybe if there was, I suppose there's two elements. It was the backs to the wall job. I suppose they were being written off after the league, and I suppose I was one of them. I said there were probably them maybe along with Wexford had shown nothing that they would say that they were going to bring Anton into the league, but obviously, or into the championship. But obviously they had held something in reserve, and like I wouldn't discount maybe the under-20s winning the previous Wednesday night. It just maybe took a lot of the pressure off, and I know there was no players involved as far as I know. Maybe it was one player, but like I just thought maybe it served them well. How would you say? Like I just think Antrim maybe as Mark said earlier on, maybe in terms of what Waterford, maybe Antrim maybe just got caught up in the glow of the league and all the applause they were getting. Maybe they didn't realise that league is league and championship is championship, and we probably saw it at. I was watching the first 20 minutes, and while it was relatively competitive at that stage, I thought to myself like Dublin are going to win this pulling away because they were pulling with a bit more urgency. I think they'll give Galway lots of it this weekend. I think it'll be a high scoring game. I think Galway will win it, but I don't think a Dublin have anything to lose. The Galway are going to be raging hot favourites for this one. I think it'll be an interesting. I think there'll be two cracking semi-finals in Leinster. I think there's going to be a shock in the other one, but I don't think there'll be a shock in the first one.
Yeah, Jones, a couple of years ago that Dublin beat Galway in a Leinster round robin game. That was the one when, going into the last game, any team could have gotten through and any team could have been knocked out. I think Carlow, they were obviously out of it at that stage, but just it was all on the table that final day. Joe Canning, I think, was only able to come on as a sub. Dublin had a number of injuries before the game. Owen O'Donnell went off injured very early in the game, as did Conor Whelan that same day. So, like, the atmosphere in Parnell Park was unbelievable. And the fact that this has been moved from Portlaoise to Croke Park, I think that actually comes against Dublin a little bit, because Galway, they look like they've found some extra players. They look like they've got pace, power, the closest thing to Limerick out there. So, Mark, in a way, I think that in itself, the venue, gives Galway a bit of an edge going into this.
Yeah, they like the wide open spaces there. I too was impressed with Dublin last week. I was a little bit unexpected. We probably read a lot into league form, and well, we should know at this stage that league and championship are different, but I think Dublin probably had their best performance in years, I would imagine. Because this isn't a knockout game, I'd give Dublin a chance. I think if it was knockout, I think Galway would be just primed and ready for it. I think Galway have the better team. I think they just, they just have they're a little bit ahead of where Dublin are at the moment. It all depends, if Galway come into this with the intensity of championship and if they play at 100%. I don't think Dublin will last with them for the 70 minutes. Big boost for Dublin hurling though over the week with the under-20s and with winning that game against Antrim. So they should be in a good place going into this match. Galway favourites, but giving Dublin a certain chance in it.
Yeah, and are there any players that you'd think would be particularly decisive in this game, Shane? And from my money, I think Ronan Hayes is developing as like a really top forward, and Cian Boland has looked a very promising player the last couple of years. He's now, maybe he'll finally get that run where he doesn't have a couple of injuries hampering him. Keane O'Sullivan is somebody that I've seen at St. Bridget's for the last number of years. He's very good. And Danny Sutcliffe is getting back to a serious level. Now, I think...
I'd leave it the other one. I've always been a big fan of Cian Boland. I just think he's a sort of a Bonner Maher type hurler that he can score, but he's a fantastic engine on him. He's especially cutting in from the wing forward position. Even sort of Chris Crummy is beginning to settle in a wing forward. I think it'll be a high scoring affair. I just think... I think defensively Galway will probably just have a bit too much strength, and that could be the difference on the day.
Yeah, not to mention the likes of Conor Whelan, Brian Kincannon, Joe Canning, and there's plenty more to come as well in that forward line. Kilkenny against Wexford, that game's on at 4:30 at Croke Park. Now, several weeks ago, I suppose at this stage, 3 or 4 weeks ago, Wexford went down to Nolan Park and they got fairly pasted. They were down by 14 at half-time, lost by 10 for a finish. But they looked like a team that was jaded because there was players stuck to the ground during that game. And when I saw them last week putting, I think it was it 5-31? Yeah, 5-31 they put up against a very, very poor Laois side who themselves put up 123. They just looked like a team full of energy again. And Mark, I really thought that, reflected on it, that Wexford really sold us a pup that day down in Nolan Park when they lost in the league.
Yeah, they must have. They were... I don't want to use the word depressing, but like it was heading in that direction to watch them. They really looked aimless in their hurling, definitely looked jaded. So I suppose there's a certain amount of pressure on Davy Fitz now to make some progress this year. They won Leinster in 2019, didn't really make any waves at all last year. So, there's probably a lot of pressure on him to achieve something again this year. I don't know where they are. I think we'll have to wait and see Sunday. I don't think we can read a lot into the Laois game. Laois, as you said, weren't good, but they still scored, well over 20 scores against Wexford, which isn't a great sign either. Kilkenny, you're going to get the same as you always get with Kilkenny. They'll fight. They'll be hard to beat. They probably won't do too much wrong. They'll put themselves in a position to win the game probably. I think it really depends on whether Wexford sold us a pup or how much we can read into that Laois game.
What do you think, Shane? I mean, this isn't the Kilkenny team of old. I mean, there's still something of an aura anyway because of Brian Cody and the likes of TJ Reid still being there. But there's certainly far more ordinary hurlers than there used to be in that lineup. It's not kind of full of all-stars and hurler of the years as it used to be before.
No, and like in fairness, I think if there's something you could take from the league in terms of form is Kilkenny, because they're generally consistent. But that last 20 minutes against Clare concerned me from a Kilkenny point of view, because I couldn't understand how they lost that game, because there was so much control, but yet they conceded 2 goals in 2 minutes and the match turned on its head. I think, look, my mother's not going to like me for saying this, and the Kilkenny relatives, I think Wexford are going to win this one. I like the sort of the ruthlessness of what Wexford did against Laois last weekend. Look, they had the game sewn up at half time, but they still kept putting the foot to the floor. They went for goals in the last 20 minutes, and if there's been one weakness in the Kilkenny team in the league, they've been leaking goals. They can leak 3 to Antrim. They leaked, was it 4 to Clare in the last game? If Wexford bring that intent to go for goals, I think they'll get them again. I don't know. I think if what's his name, Adrian Mullen. If Adrian Mullen doesn't play, I just think it too much falls on TJ Reid's shoulders to get the scores. Like Owen Cody will chip in with maybe 3 or 4. John Donnelly's going to get a few scores. And Alan Murphy, we haven't seen how good Alan Murphy is in Championship hurling. He's been a good solid league hurler, but can he finally convert to the Championship? I don't know. I just get the sense that this has been the game that has been on Davy's radar since the draw was made, and I just think a lot like it was 2018 maybe, when Kilkenny went to Wexford Park for a big knockout game. I think it was in Davy's first year in charge, and he got
17.
Yeah, 17. I think this is another one where Wexford might get over the line in this one and get to a Leinster final.
But you can't trust them. Look what happened with Wexford last year. Beaten, was it by 13 points by Galway, hammered then by Clare in the qualifier down in, I think it was Port Laois. And I felt a crazy matchup that he put Matt O'Hanlon on Tony Kelly. Now, Tony Kelly will exploit most players, but I think Matt O'Hanlon has shown before that he's pretty well suited to TJ Reid. That doesn't mean he beats him in every kind of matchup they have, but he's a fairly decent matchup. And if he does well, if he breaks even there, if Lee Chin, who wasn't fully fit last year, plays well, if Rory O'Connor continues I think Rory O'Connor is playing like a hurler of the year would. I don't know if Wexford will get far enough for him to kind of realise that potential. But if everything goes right with those couple of things, then I think the couple of frailties that are in that Kilkenny team, which is, I think they have too many wing backs. You know what I said? We've too many corner forwards. I think they have too many wing backs in their team between midfield, the full back line, where you could say Paddy Deegan is probably a wing back, and midfield maybe Killian Buckley, who's probably a wing back, is in there. And they don't have massive size either. So I just think, Mark, all told, if Wexford get everything right here, they're in a great spot to win this.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And Shane said, Kilkenny are not the team of old. And there's a couple of statistics that bear that out. They haven't won an under 21. Try not to smile here. Haven't won under 21 All Ireland since 2008. Haven't won a minor All Ireland since 2014. Senior All Ireland 2015. Whereas previously all their teams were built on natural All Ireland winners. They might have 1 or 2 or 3 medals between the underage grades. So, there's an awful lot to be said for having done that. Wexford, in fairness to them, They have a few Leinster under 20 or 21 titles, and I think they're building their team out of that. But yeah, you can't trust Kilkenny as much as you could. Another interesting one as well, and I believe this is right. I believe TJ Reid is actually older than any of the Tipp players. And we talk a lot about Tipp being a little bit old, or some people talk about Tipp being a little bit old. But Kilkenny rely on him so much, and he's obviously their oldest player. So,
I just think Davies' game plan, and I think Wexford are a more athletic team. I just think he's going to say to Jack O'Connor, reach in, just run at this Kilkenny team, and their goal chances are going to present us. I know you don't want to take too much from the Laois game, as Laois just stood off them too much, but there was just a bit of ruthlessness, and there's going for goals in the last 20 minutes when the match was sewn up. I just think that's going to be Wexford's MO this weekend. I think Wexford know if they score 3, 4, 5 goals this weekend, I think they'll win the game, because I just don't know where Kilkenny have the firepower up front to TJ Reid is going to get his maybe 110, 111, 112, but who else is going to chip in with maybe a 2-3 or 2-4? Like Billy Ryan has the potential to do it, hasn't done it yet. They're probably Owen Cody, fantastic potential, very young. If Adrian Mullen is fantastic, they just don't have that second key forward at the moment, Kilkenny, to take the pressure off Reid for me.
Yeah, and they actually probably gone back to a few players that several years ago probably weren't quite good enough to do it, and now that they're a little bit later in their 20s, they're kind of going to them, which to me in the past, if somebody in those Brian Cody teams wasn't up to scratch, they were never seen again. Yeah. And I also wonder if being in Division 1B, getting a false sense of where they were at going through most of that league, because Dublin, they beat them well enough, if I remember correctly. They beat Laois, they beat Antrim, albeit Antrim came from 8 behind to draw a level with them. Wexford, we all suspect, sold us a pup. And then Clare, the way Clare beat them so convincingly, well, not convincingly on the scoreline, it was 420 to 125, so there wasn't that much in it. But I wonder, between that and the collapses last year against Dublin, where they did come through by a point, but also against Waterford, is there even a fear inside their own camp, or is there a suspicion inside their own camp, Mark, that maybe we're not exactly a top All-Ireland contender at the moment? Because I think they're still considered All-Ireland contenders, but I don't know if they're.
They're not in. They wouldn't be in my list, to be honest with you. My list is probably a little bit short, but I think outside of Limerick, Galway, and hopefully Tipp, I think your All-Ireland winners are going to come in that. I think they have to be worried, based on what we've talked about, based on, you're saying they're really desperately looking for players, whereas they were just coming out of everywhere back in the day. They're desperately looking for the top class players that are going to make a difference, and I don't see them as being there at the moment. And I think they will go down before they go up. I think they'll, when TJ is coming to the end of his career, there's a couple of others that have been around a long time. And I'm not trying to write them off just because they're Kilkenny either. I think you have to look at the facts here. I think that you'd have to be worried if you're a Kilkenny supporter about the next few years.
And just before we finish up, actually, will we make our predictions? I'm going to go Wexford here, even though I just can't trust them, Shane.
Yeah, I'm going Wexford. I think Wexford and Galway will be in the final.
Yeah, and Mark?
Yeah, I'll bow down to your knowledge and go with Wexford. I don't. I think we have to see how good they are. Based, we can't judge a huge amount against Laois, but yeah, I think they might have enough for Kilkenny.
And just before we finish up, lads, a quick look at the Camogie there last weekend, the Munster semi-final at Páirc Uí Rinn. Cork 4-13, Tipperary 16 points after going so well in the league, and I know obviously collapsing against Kilkenny in the semi-final. That's a disappointment, Shane.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I suppose they got off to a bad start, but in fairness, they got back. With 11 minutes to go, they were only a point out, and they had all the momentum, but they conceded 2 goals for a finish. I just think it's been interesting in the league, the matches they played this year, particularly against Cork, the 2 games, one in the league, one in the championship, and the Kilkenny game. They've conceded 10 goals in 3 matches, and they're not scoring at the other end. It's against the big teams. The problem is conceding goals. They've got to tighten up at the ship at the back. I think it's look. The Munster Championship means nothing for the All-Ireland they're probably going to qualify from their group in the All-Ireland series involving Limerick, Wexford and Offaly. They're going to get through from that. So you get to an All-Ireland quarter-final, hopefully an All-Ireland semi-final where you're meeting one of the other three. And look, I don't think they'll lose too much sleep, but I think Bill Maloney and the backroom team have got to go away and think, how do we stop conceding goals against the big three, and how do we score more of them at the other end? I think that's what they've got to look at going forward.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world, Mark.
No, it's not. No, I definitely agree with Shane. Like, I mean, once goals are leaking in, and if they're coming at the wrong time, it really puts you on the back foot. I think Tipp will be looking for progress this year. They'll be looking to get an improvement, and they'll be looking to come up to the levels of Kilkenny and Galway and Cork even. But that's really, I think, what we want to see. They've been down for a few years. We haven't quite reached those levels, so we'll be looking for that improvement and that progress, and to see that we can match those teams, because that's who's going to be there at the business end of the year.
Yeah, just before we go there, Shane, I suppose we just a couple of housekeeping things in terms of the Guardian. We have a jersey competition in the Guardian this week. Hopefully each of the next 4 weeks we're going to have Tipperary jerseys to give away. So just to mention that, and just another issue on. I suppose we're always intrigued every year as to who makes the underage panels, and I suppose that those lists came out in the last week, and I suppose the 3 clubs of us involved, I think we all have, I think Killarwan have Keane O'Kelly with the 20s, and O'Lura have Colin Fogarty and Dara Guinan with the minors, and I suppose Bursley are nearly stacked at the moment between both clubs and have both teams, and have Kevin Maher as the under 20 captain. I suppose it's an exciting time for those players to get in there, and I suppose it's tough on them that they're just it's just straight knockout. So you're just hoping to see who's going to shine. And I suppose the interesting thing for me, particularly off the minor squad and what James Woodlock has put together, is so many unfashionable clubs that are there. And sorry, unfashionable is probably not the right word. The smaller clubs, the Ballyloobies, the Feathers, the Father Sheehy's, even I think Clare have 2 minors this year. So it's great to see it spreading around the county. And you hope from their point of view, like, it's a development. Especially under 17 is a development grade now. Like, and it's straight knockout. Like, and just not to be putting too much pressure on these young lads. Let them hurl, let them develop. Look, if it doesn't happen for them this year, it's not going to be the end of the world. But I just thought that was the interesting thing for me. I don't know whether the guys think, just the great spread of clubs, particularly on the hurling side, particularly the smaller, even the junior clubs are not being forgotten about.
I think there's a huge amount of work being done, Shane, in all clubs, and the clubs that we might call junior clubs or whatever. I think the coaching goes on from a very young age, so those players probably in those clubs now have the opportunities that they mightn't have had before, maybe due to that lack of coaching or whatever. But I was involved, like yourself, with our club minor teams last year. I thought the standard was very high around North Tipp. I thought there were some great hurlers, and I'm involved, I suppose, with underage teams in Killarwan, and the standard really impresses me around. I think there's massive work being done in most clubs in North Tipperary and further down the county as well.
Yeah, I know. I remember I wrote a piece in the Guardian a few weeks ago about there was a lot of cribbing that why certain guys didn't make the panel, or not even that, why certain guys didn't even get a trial. And it just shows you, while every club might think, God, we have 2, 3, 4 lads, it'd be good for the county, but when you multiply that by 72 clubs, it just shows you the depth of talent there is, that maybe there might be some guys in a certain club that you might think are good enough, but they're not even good enough. I wouldn't say they're good enough for a trial, but it just shows the depth that there is, that James Woodlock and even John Devan have to go through every year just to put a final 30 or 31 together.
Definitely, yeah. And I was involved there, sure, it's over 10 years ago now myself with the minors, and the one thing you want is to try and see every player who could possibly have a chance of making it. But you get a huge amount of calls just like that, from a lad who might have played well in training, or he might be flying in training, marking some other fella from his own club, or maybe he's playing a club match or whatever, and he's going really well. But generally, what you might have 5 exceptional players. You might have another 10 really good players who are probably definitely going to make the panel, and then there's a lot of players, or a huge amount of players there at a certain level, maybe at a similar level, and you really have to get them in and see how they perform against other players at their level, because that's how you have to judge them. You have to judge them against other players who are at their level, not necessarily, they'll get seen in their club matches, but your final judgment has to be based how they do against other top level players.
Now, final question, Mark, that I have for you is, last year when we were watching the Tipp minors against the Limerick minors seemed to play the exact same way as their senior team, the same use of the ball, that type of thing as well. If you're over or involved in a management team of a minors, can you be considering that sort of thing? Like, would you nearly need the county board coming to you saying, look, forget about results, we're going to back you this year and next year no matter what. We just want you to play into a sort of a system that this is Tipperary hurling, this is Limerick hurling, whatever. And we need you to do that no matter what, because I'd imagine plenty of managers are there thinking, I need to make an impact straight away, and they're not necessarily thinking of the longer term future of Tip hurling.
Well, if Limerick are doing that, it's definitely joined up thinking. It's definitely something that has been discussed between the panels, and it's not something just happened, I would imagine. Now, unless you have a manager there who really admires the way the seniors play, and why wouldn't he, and wants to implement that himself, but you'd have to imagine that it has come from somewhere now. That obviously they have they've improved their underage coaching over the last 10 or 15 years in Limerick, so I imagine that it's definitely something that's been instructed rather than something that has happened by chance. And is that something we should bring into Tipperary? I'm not sure if it is. Do we have a certain way of playing, a certain style, or do we base everything on the players we have? It's something that's definitely worth discussing.
Absolutely. So, Shane, is that it, or had you one final point?
Yeah, no, that's it. It's just I think a lot of it depends on maybe what. Like, ideally, you'd love to play the same style the whole time, but I think it's a lot like what maybe Clare were forced to do with that under-21 team and for the senior. Like, a lot of them were small, nippy guys. So, why play maybe a traditional style which maybe doesn't get the best out of the smaller guy? I think it all depends on maybe if you're lucky enough maybe to maybe go down the Limerick route, and maybe where you have room maybe to maybe look at the likes of Cathal O'Neill and Colin Coughlin maybe at 16 and 17, think, and maybe Adam English is probably the next one coming through. That okay, maybe there's certain guys that you can target at 16. They're definitely going to make it, so we can develop them. Because they're big and strong too. Like, I think a lot depends on size as well. Like, and in terms of who are your best players, and maybe creating a style of hurling around that group of players as well. So I wouldn't get too caught up on maybe all the teams having to play it a certain way. Like, I just think it depends on the strengths and weaknesses of the crop of players maybe at underage at that point in time.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that's it for Tipcast episode 9 this week. My thanks to Mark O'Leary and to Shane Brophy. Enjoy the matches this weekend, lads.
Thanks very much, guys.
Welcome to Tipcast by the Nina Guardian.